to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the coronation of King Mswati III. Ambassador Matemadanda received me and accompanied me throughout the event. As per tradition, we shared a meal, laughed, and reminisced about the days of the armed struggle, about departed comrades, as well as views on how we can grow relations with the countries where he was accredited as ambassador. He later saw me off as I returned home. Unbeknown to me, that was the last meal we would share, the last handshake, and the last wave of goodbye as I bid him farewell. It was therefore with immense shock and sadness that I received the news of his passing on last Saturday, the 20th of June, 2026, at Pararenyatwa Hospital. His demise is a blow to our nation, and we grieve this loss. On behalf of our Revolutionary Mass Party, ZANU-PF, the people and government of Zimbabwe, that of my family, and indeed on my behalf, I once again extend heartfelt condolences to the Matemadanda family. Our last national hero, Comrade Victor Matemadanda, was unwavering in his ideological clarity, patriotism, and loyalty to the values of the armed liberation struggle. He answered the call of our national armed struggle and remained fiercely dedicated to the complete economic liberation of our motherland, Zimbabwe. We have lost a leader whose indelible legacy will serve as a guidance to future generations. In honor of his gallantry, his patriotism, and dedicated service to our beloved motherland, Zimbabwe, as well as our partisan PF, we inter him here at this national shrine alongside other heroes and heroines who consistently defended the sacred flame of the armed liberation struggle and our independence. My fellow mourners, comrades, and friends, the late national hero, Comrade Matemadanda, was born on the 3rd of March, 1960, in Gokwe. He received primary education at Nambala Primary School in Mumbwa, Zambia, and later attended Mumbwa Secondary School. In appreciation of our rich liberation history and heritage, we must immortalize the role played by Zimbabwean families who relocated to neighboring countries, particularly the indelible contribution to the early phases of the armed liberation struggle. Many of these families left the then Southern Rhodesia following forced displacements by the oppressive colonial authorities in the aftermath of the 1930 Land Apportionment Act and related persecutions. Displaced and migrant families became the nucleus of our early stages of the revolution, always ready to aid the military wings of ZANU and ZAPU, who used Zambia and Mozambique as
alright muri yezimbabwe kusangana kwatiri kuita zvakare ipo pano pazimu news update apo patinoda kupa mafirst hand update anonga ari kuitika munyika yedu yezimbabwe tangoti timbokuzivise zvinhu zviri kuitika kuheroes acre pari zvino sekuziva kwatiri kuita kuti zvinhu hazvina kumira zvakanaka kufa kwacomrade Victor Matemadanda pane maconsequences akati wandei mhuri yezimbabwe sezvo zvetiri kuziva kuti havana kufa kafiro kakanaka, havana kufa nekurwara, vakangofa nekungosotofuleka wakaiswa mushonga. Tonga tiri kuona ndo box ravo iri ndo zviri kuitika kuheroes acre pari zvino tiri kuona panapa mhuri yezimbabwe ndo box ravo iri ndo zviri kuitika kuheroes acre. I think uyu mudzimai wavo ari apa uyu. So mhuri yezimbabwe zvinhu hazvina kumira zvakanaka. Tiri kuona panapa ndi amai Victor Matemadanda avo vari kutambidzwa wacomrade Emerson Mnangagwa. Tiri kuona zviri kuitika panapa, but tiri kuona kuti vanenge vaine kakwiri kutoti no avo vari kutorwadziwa. Ndofunga muri kuvaona apa. Zvinhu hazvina kumira zvakanaka mhuri yezimbabwe. Vanenge vaine kakwiri kekutoti munhu anotambidza bhaibheri pamwe ndiye munhu ari kuassassinata veruzhinji. Tiri kuona panapa ndi president Emerson Mnangagwa vanga vari kutaura speech yavanga vachitaura. Tiri kuona pari kuitika zvinhu zvakasiyana siyana. Arrival comrade Emerson Mnangagwa tichienda kuarrival yavice president Kosotino Chiwenga. So iripo futi arrival yavice president Kosotino Chiwenga
had, that same view, the one that I'm expressing now. To say when you hear them say and to make it worse, they even went on to say it is no longer CAP 3, but it is now CA3, constitutional amendment law. Like it is no longer a bill, but it is now, a law. But when a figure like Nelson Chamisa, when it's coming out, I know Kuti, some folks, I read your contributions. I read what you said. I read how you responded. I read your comments. But when a person like him, comes through, right? And he's saying something that is very, different. And he's saying CAP 3 is not a done deal. You might want to question, his leadership. You might want to question his timing. You might want to question his strategy. Or you might want to say that, anyway, it is somebody who's simply, catching up with the events. But in some sense, in some way, depending on what is going to happen next, that effect is undeniable. What it means and what it spells out is that narrative that CAP 3 is not a done deal has probably cracked open the debate on CAP 3 again. I know it hasn't died. There's probably an angle that has been opened up. But for us to then immerse ourselves in his message and understand and begin to get to grips, with it, you need to understand, and we need to be clear about where we are with this constitutional, process. Because I think, that is key, that is fundamental. Because it tells us where we are and why such a statement can be believed or it cannot be believed. We know the parliament has voted yes, but we also know that is not the end of the story. Because this bill is now moving to the Senate. where it must secure a two-thirds majority. I don't know if ZANU-PF will get a two-thirds majority, but from what I've read and from what I've seen, ZANU-PF does not have a two-thirds majority. In if we are doing, the arithmetic, the numbers, they do not have that two-thirds majority. But their avenues, means, and ways and processes that they can put in place to gain the two-thirds majority. Remember, they've got the disability group that is in parliament, with the chiefs group that is in parliament, with also the Shabangu factor that is in parliament. And if those are manipulated enough, they can create that two-thirds majority. That is a reality that we must face up to. That is a reality that we must live with. So this bill is now moving, to the Senate, and if it passes, Emerson Mnangagwa only has to assent, put, pen to paper, his signature, and it becomes, the law. So when we are looking at this moment, because of these things, that are about to come, I don't think, when we are looking at everything, that has happened and what is about to come, I don't think it can bring us to that closure. No. I think it brings us to a point where the political and the constitutional and the civic, mandate that we all have, collide. And into that, collusion, it is not surprising that we are getting a message that is being inserted by Nelson Chamisa that is saying it is not all about parliament. It is not all about ZANU-PF. It is not all about opposition benches, but it is about the citizen, and that is fundamental, and that is key. Because what I can translate, or what I can read from what he said, is that he's saying that nothing is final without the people of Zimbabwe. Any process that excludes the people of Zimbabwe, the citizens of Zimbabwe, is an incomplete process. Legitimacy is not manufactured in a chamber like parliament, like senate. It is something that gets end in the public square. I know some of you guys, I know one of the arguments that has been put out there by some folks. People have questioned, has queried his timing. Say, but hang on a minute. All along, you're quiet. At one point, you even came and you say that there's no constitution, to defend. And at one point, you said, you know what? This is not where our focus, should be. We are focusing on a Chokwadi. That by the signals that you can see, I know some people, are already, being immersed with this, are already, in this. They're already saying, Kuti, Chapati is now about, to be born. So we can debate, the timing. We can debate, the strategy. We can debate whether he's led, whether it is necessary, or whether what he's saying is symbolic or catalytic. I don't know what angle you might come with. But one thing that we cannot ignore is the kind of shift that this creates. Because him is a major political actor. You can argue with that. You can debate, you can push back against that. But it remains, a fact. That him coming out at this juncture, whether you're questioning, his timing, but whether you're saying that, he's late, whether you're saying that, is it now necessary for you to come through and say it is not a done deal? Yet, there were instances in the past where you could have come in and said, hey, we should not be in a position to be entertaining, this. Whether those are some of the things, that you've got in your arsenal of, pushing back. But the fact remains that he remains a major political actor and is challenging the done deal narrative. And that challenge, ladies and gentlemen, whether you agree with it or you do not agree with it, it does two things. I believe it does, two things. It reopens, the civic imagination, because that is important. Because there are folks who had resigned themselves to the inevitability. Mr. Anderson, what you are facing right here is the inevitable, the distraction. But it's bringing us to this right here to say we are not in matrix. Brings us to that inevitability whereby suddenly people remember that the aspect of a constitutional process is not theater, it is real, and it requires public legitimacy. That is the first thing. Whether you agree with it or you don't agree with it, that has got nothing to do with me. That is none of my concern. But I want to believe that if you are an ardent follower of what a constitutional process is supposed to be, it makes you want to pay attention to what is going on and find a space where you can sit as an individual, a space where you can occupy as an individual. Because when the parliament voted overwhelmingly for this, some of you resigned to the fact, Yekutizo, it is a done deal. But maybe, probably, he's not speaking to the next stage. And he's not a done deal, it's probably reframing the next stage, the Senate stage. That we should not expect Senate to rubber stamp on this thing. But we should expect Senate as a playground that brings about a contested moment. A moment where scrutiny, pressure, and participation still matter. So what is it that we need to do as a people? How do we achieve the scrutiny? How do we achieve the pressure? How do we make sure that participation matters to such an extent that what we expected to have happened at the parliamentary stage is what we're expecting to happen at the Senate stage, at the Senate stage, whereby we're expecting these people to tap into their conscience and say, this is not right.